So welcome to the 7th of these lectures on moral psychology. It's fantastic that you are still here. This, I think, is the most interesting, in a way for me, the core of the whole course that we're going to cover today. So I hope you find that interesting too. What's going on? Well, we're considering in the third part of the course implications of moral psychology for ethics. And last week we did that by considering ethical arguments from within. By that I mean we considered ethical arguments which appear to have premises that could be supported or undermined by evidence from moral psychology. So we were taking the point of view of the argument, assuming that the overall strategy works, and then using moral psychology to supplement it. In today's lecture, we're going to look at the implications of moral psychology for ethics if we take an approach from without. So what we're trying to do here is not to take arguments, existing arguments for granted, but rather think about how discoveries in moral psychology might actually show us that certain kind of arguments are just bad ways of arguing, insofar as we want to use the arguments to gain knowledge of their conclusion. So we're going to consider an argument which is a loose reconstruction of an argument by Joshua Green that aims to show that many different ways of doing ethics by some great people, so Foote, Rawls, Railton, Scanlon, all of these people are doing ethics in a way which appears won't yield arguments where we can gain knowledge of the conclusion through the argument, if Green is right. So that would be an interesting argument to consider. Let me state the conclusions like this. It's actually two conclusions. The first is that discoveries in moral psychology could no more undermine or support ethical principles than discoveries about physical cognition could undermine or support theories in physics. So that's the first conclusion. We can't actually get from moral psychology to ethical principles. Now that sounds like a kind of negative answer to our question for part 3, and indeed it is. But there's also a positive part, and the positive part, this is the from the outside thing, is that discoveries in moral psychology might provide us with good reason not to rely on not justified inferentially premises about particular scenarios in arguing for or against ethical principles. And this is the thing that will create enormous trouble. This is the thing that will create enormous trouble for ethical arguments, particularly as we can probably generalize away to a wider range of not inferentially justified premises, not just those that are about particular scenarios. Now, in today's lecture, it has a slightly odd structure. So there's a rather long preview that covers some interesting background about physical cognition. I think that's useful and important because I'm very keen for us to make comparisons to other domains outside of ethics, where a lot more is known about the cognitive processes. I think that's indispensable. On the other hand, you may not want to do that. You may be very short of time. My recommendation in that case is to go straight to the outline of Green's argument and then just selectively use sections depending on which premises you find either somewhat confusing or somewhat objectionable, and see if I can defend the premises to reach the conclusion to your satisfaction. All right, good luck. Hold tight. Let's go and see how that argument goes.